One more time on the order.
Yeah, sure. It's the K, environment, food security, warming.
Is there any specific order on the critique, like framework at the top? Is there going to be?
No. Framework's going to be covered in the 1R. So it's just going to be.
So there's going to be a big overview.
Yeah, there's going to be an overview. Is anyone not ready?
The 1NC was pretty confusing about what exactly the critique is, but conscientization allows us to name our world a meaningful education that helps recognize and understand the impact that societal condition and oppression have on our lives, a constant clarification of what remains hidden within us and that sees the world dynamically and inspires us to work against forces of oppression, became active in a world efforts to transform the world. Coming out of the 2AC, they have not provided clear disadvantage to our methodology, which is a process of conscientization, is a process of constant clarifying of who we are and how we operate under the society of oppression. That is a constant epistemological clarification. That's Osajima evidence of our specificity. Tracks the process of conscientization. We have decided to critically and unflinchingly analyze the paradigms of the USA and how they perpetuate antagonism. That is Wilderson. And in this instance, this is a myth of the model minority. One of the reasons why the stereotype exists is because Asians, Americans believe in it, so they fall back on it, and that's Chang. We reject that. The myth of the model minority states that Asians are well off and all successful, which is a tool used by white supremacists to perpetuate oppression, saying, hey, blacks and Latinos, why can't you be as good as the Asians? And we, by undergoing a process of conscientization, we are able to clarify how we are, and as Brian hates on as Koreans, and as Asians, how I am able to use my Korean identity to clarify my stance in society and how I operate, and I refuse to be used as tools of white supremacists. As a conscientization is a good strategy for me to break down the entirety of the civil society. Civil society rationalizes any action through the myth of the model minority, which says that all immigrants are well off and well-being, so it says that it must be the black and Latinos' fault for not doing as well since the Asians are succeeding. The root cause argument are non-responsive because even if the myth of the model minority, the root cause and form of oppression is still justification of current civil society and oppression, it's probably a good idea. This is the first step in deconstructing epistemological growth by questioning our own complicity within the system of oppression. This is the only thing that matters because in round and their advocacy is going to translate into real world solvency. We are critiqued and go on to the next round. That makes epistemological growth the portable impact. I'll do the impact extensions here. There are three conceded impact of this critique. First is the psychological violence of the Asian Americans, especially Asian Americans, are always excluded from the discussion of any form of welfare, especially Southeast Asians, or any of their needs, because the myth of the model minority perpetuates the idea that they're all well off and successful as well in housing and education. This allows them to ignore and be discriminated upon. That is the face of present-day America. Now, the second impact is the myth of the model minority justifies the oppression of other minority groups. I've already explained and will clarify systems of white supremacy deny their racial oppression by pointing towards the model minority myth, saying, oh, look, these Asians are coping so well in our civil society that allows these Asian Americans that allows them to deny that the system of oppression, the USFG, are continuing to occur, and saying that we live in a civil society where Asians are so successful, as well as propping up other forms of oppression by saying that their oppression that black and Latinos have faced have to do with their own cultural values and not us. So I'll use my identity to break down that sort of myth of the model minority. Now, moving on to the link analysis, they fundamentally mishandle our Crenshaw and Farley evidence when the 1AC speech act is silent upon the issue of race. That is the racist act itself. The rhetorical silence creates an assumed norm. We're not discussing and analyzing such racial implications and undercurrents of the issues, okay, which is the turn only feeds the forces of whiteness and the racism in itself. The fact that the act is silent makes it seem like the issue of race is neutral, even though it clearly is, and that's Crenshaw 97. And then on to the Farley evidence, the 1AC's usage of the state is bad because that is what makes it a slave's perfect moment. Relying on this USFG and acknowledging that it has the emancipatory power to solve for their advantage is the action of ceding your political and personal agency to the racist institution. The act takes no stance in deconstructing oppressive structures and actually emboldens it by giving it hegemonic power. That's Farley 5. This is problematic because any course of action that is not taking an active stance against it is actually perpetuating the racist act itself. Now to the perm debate. Reject the 2AC's claims to helping and solving oppression. The absence of discussion about system of whiteness in the 1AC means that the affirmative severs out of the representation, thus spiking out of any offense we make on case. The 1AC is a rhetorical artifact and their silence is active, not passive. We have a critique. We are a critique of their active form of silence. That's Crenshaw. If they truly mean anything that they say in the generic 2AC race blogs, they probably could have done, should have, and talked about it earlier in the debate. The fact that it wasn't talked about in the beginning proved that Crenshaw was right and that whiteness hides itself until it is pointed out. That is exactly exactly what the negative team has done. The AF has performed a racist act. They won't, as you have seen in this round, think anything of it unless you get called out for it like we did. And just because they are having this sort of conversation right now about race right now doesn't mean that the initial action was racist. Now onto the Hydra DA and their claims for state action doesn't apply because the only way to solve for race is they claim is to solve for reformism, but reformism is non-responsive to the alternative of unflinching paradigm, and that's we agree that the things can get better, slaves and the plantation can get shorter work days. It doesn't change the structural position that the slave is still a slave. The level of analysis must be on an ontological where the only reform is the fundamental challenge of the system. You don't get access to reformism because the affirmative isn't reformism. How does it promote racial justice? This is me reading a politics link and then getting an loyalty impact. Their argument don't jive. It should be rejected. The United States federal government remains institutional race. The House has been remodeled and never have been taken down. Seemingly race-neutral policies mask the way racism is embedded. That's Ephesians 2K. The U.S. report did not provide an integrated analysis of how and why institutional racism still pervades the society. Society remains a racist system in its foundation, and no large-scale action ever taken to rebuild this is these institutional arrangements were designed and anti-black pressure firmly in place of the historically elder society having experienced large-scale revolutions for domination of U.S. society by whites is a non-atomic Magna Carta. This system then an answer to the only ethical option is to call for the end of the world. The first Wilderson evidence is really good on talking about how we can't try to reform within the system about using the states because you can't use the system because the system is inherently racist. My speech act and my partner's speech act is a way of deconstructing this sort of system by saying that we will not be used as tools of white supremacists and that we will undergo an unflinching paradigmatic analysis. If you think about it, conscientization and unflinching paradigmatic analysis, analyzing whether civil society is ethical or not, is a way in which we question what the USFG does and question what the USFG does. They say social death doesn't exist, but the point is that social death and white supremacy is invisible. That's Crenshaw. That's why you don't think it exists. Crenshaw and Farley specifically talk about that white supremacy operates under invisibility and is only unveiled when it is pointed out. Now, onto case first insolvency, they say that they open it to public, but in the first CX1, I specifically asked them multiple times about who exactly does the plan and how it controls the entirety of the plan. They definitively answered the USFG. This is what our Crenshaw evidence is talking about, that they only acknowledge real racism once that it is pointed out. It doesn't mean that the original action was racist. Now onto warming, they say allowing for warming to continue perpetuates racism, to continue all the cards talk about is that environmental disasters happen near areas polluted by minorities. They bring Hurricane Katrina as an example. This is non-responsive to, and also they say that the ocean and food are literally key to everything core to sustaining life on earth and culture and more. You can't recreate civil society without oxygen, and they say you can't recreate civil society without oxygen and can't engage in the alt if you don't have food. But our Dixon 12 evidence is probably the strongest link evidence in the case. With the Dixon 12 evidence specifically talks about how is that the government operates racism under indivisibility, not only indivisibility but under eco-racism, even though their plan plus says that they are going to apply the doctrine to all people to help minorities, to feed groups of minorities. The government simply does not do this, meaning that poor minorities will continue to be harmed, and they continue to do this to poor minorities because they don't have a voice in society. And this evidence is specific insight to how about when they do their plan, it's going to only be in areas of white rich people and will only make the white rich people stronger.
Go serious.
Let's talk about the last analysis you did on the Dickinson evidence, saying that the plan just says we do stuff, not that we do stuff to solve for issues. That's a pretty bold assertion in a world where you haven't contested the solvency of the plan. How can you say that the plan doesn't solve or create solvency and reforms for the current harms that we identify in the YC?
Okay, so we don't have to make solvency indicts to show that you're only doing this to perpetuate white racism.
Okay. So you think that I read the 2AC, my partner read the 1AC to perpetuate white racism?
Whether it was inadvertent or advertent, wittingly, it
okay,
doesn't
am
matter.
I a racist?
I'm not saying you're a racist. I'm saying the USFGs are racist.
All right, so by advocating USFG action, am I a racist?
Not only that.
Am I oppressing you?
No, but there's oppression, and we should use the debate space in order to deconstruct it. Spanos is really good on talking.
All right, what is the affirmative offense that we're supposed to have against your critique? It seems like you can just stand up, read your critique, and win every debate by not even touching the affirmative and just talking about how the state is bad. And it's like an independent advocacy. What is the affirmative supposed to do to answer your critique?
propose a different methodology?
So every AF is supposed to stand up in the 1AC and talk about racial oppression, even though the topic is about oceans and ocean exploration and development.
The purpose of a critique is to critique the underlying assumptions that the affirmative stance takes. That's exactly what we're doing. My partner Brian and I saw.
Okay, let's talk about the whole silence equals racism thing. How does us not reading a card about whiteness in the 1AC mean that we're racist?
Oh, Crenshaw evidence? Okay, so the Crenshaw evidence is really good on talking about how, you're silent upon the issue of race, not talking about race in the 1AC. That is the racist
just by
act
not
itself.
talking about a specific issue means that we are making that issue worse. We are actively making that issue
The
worse.
fact that the app is silent makes it seem like issues such as race are neutral and that racist institutions don't exist. This is what it talks about.
How does the public trust doctrine make it seem like racism doesn't exist?
No, it's your absence of discussing the racial issues in the 1AC. Or Crenshaw, you fundamentally mishandle the link evidence. Talks about it's a
I made a lot of
rhetorical
answers.
silence.
Okay.
You create an assumed norm where
Sure,
not discussing.
how does deconstruction factor into your alternative? Because Spanos
okay.
writes in the context of security rhetoric in the U.S. intervention in Vietnam. I'm pretty sure he's not going to agree
No,
with
Spanos-
Wilson's
Okay,
racist.
Spanos in this context talks about how there are underlying currents of racism within intellectual institutions such as debate, and it's
Alright.
key to deconstructing
If
it.
there are existing intellectual forms of oppression and racism, why, as the affirmative, do we have to be punished for the existence of those things? If we prove that the 1AC is a good idea, doesn't that mean even if there's systems that exist that are bad, shouldn't we do the 1AC?
You don't cause real world change.
Cool.
Take a look over there.
Are you taking prep?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I took all of that, so it's just 10 minutes. I took all of those. But you need to explain the Crenshaw and the
I didn't.
No, oh yeah. You can just go on the famous.